an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Blood of Elves, Chapter 6, in which we actually get to meet some of the people in power that are pulling the strings here and there. And I realize that this sort of thing is what has been missing from the story for me. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Melanie for commissioning this episode. She is here in the chat. So yeah, when I say that this is what has been missing for me, here's what I mean. I was like reading last time and realizing how difficult it was for me to keep certain names and certain country names as well straight in my mind and to understand like what relation they had to one another. And I was sort of puzzled by that because I'm reading a few other books that have just as many different country names and characters. And I don't have that problem with those other books. And it's not like the names are easier to remember or anything like that. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was that made this so different. And then I realized that what it is in the other books that I'm reading, you get POV chapters with the people in charge, in addition to everybody else. And I realized that the reason I remember the names of certain countries is because I associate them with personalities and just specific characters and desires. And that is how I keep them straight in my head. Oh yeah, she's the one that has that grudge against her brother. Or oh yeah, he's the one who's trying to steal his father's throne or whatever, And this book has been only dealing with we have the first chapter, which has a bunch of randoms that correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, but we haven't seen any of the characters from the opening chapter that are hanging around with Dandelion while he's singing. We haven't seen them again, right? So there's not this introduction to different rulers and any sort of dynamic that I could follow between the rulers and their, fellow rulers or people who are competing with them trying to take their place or anything like that. I heard about it secondhand when Geralt or Triss was talking about it, but I don't absorb it when it's just somebody talking to someone else about somebody. I need to be in that person's head and get a sense of their voice and who they are and what they want. And then I start to be able to fit them into the narrative much more easily. So the way that this starts off, this chapter, we are with King Vizimir of Redania, and he is talking with a bunch of different people who are, we have all right, I'm just going to read this actually, because that'll be easier. We can't afford to make a blunder or mistake now. Those assembled said nothing. Demavend, ruler of Erden, sprawled in his armchair, staring at the tankard of beer resting on his belly. Foltest, the lord of Temeria, Pontar, Macaham, and Sodden, and recently senior protector of Bruges, presented his noble profile to everyone by turning his head toward the window. At the opposite side of the table sat Henselt, king of Cadwin, running his small, piercing eyes, glistening from a face as bearded as a brigand's, over the other participants of the council. Meve, queen of Lyria, toyed pensively with the enormous rubies in her necklace, occasionally twisting her beautiful full lips into an ambiguous grimace. So, right there, I'm already remembering better. So Vizimir is concerned because he believes at a critical point in this war. And he says, when our ancestors landed on the beaches 500 years ago, the elves also hid their heads in the sand. We tore the country away from them piece by piece, and they retreated, thinking all the while that this would be the last border, that we would encroach no further. Let us be wiser, because now it is our turn. Now we are the elves. Nilfgaard is at the Yaruga, and I hear, so let them stay there. I hear, they won't come any further, but they will. You'll see. So I repeat, let us not make the same mistake as the elves. So I really liked that to open this up. It's a nice little bit of history. It seems like he's coming at this from a pretty rational standpoint. Right here, I'm getting a pretty good picture of who he is. Melanie says, we've maybe seen one, but only for half a chapter or less. Oh, talking about the people at the very beginning. I can't recall exactly if the dwarf that bonded with Ciri is the same from chapter 1. Checking now. Okay, yeah, that might be the case. Okay, so Queen Maeve. I think that's how you say it. It might be Maeve, but I've always heard that pronounced when there's an A in it, and this is spelled Meve. She thought she heard the croaking of ravens and crows, but it was only the wind and the rain, which makes me go, is it? Because there's something about that being presented the way that it is that makes me suspicious. I'm curious if there's, because, okay, I think it's Queen Maeve who keeps on, oh no, you know what? I'm thinking of the woman later when the magicians are all talking, because she is constantly adjusting a cuff that keeps twisting the wrong way, or a ring that spins around the wrong way on her hand. And I can't help but think that there's some like weird magical significance to that, because it's mentioned so specifically so many times. But I may just be being paranoid. If so, good job, book, for making me paranoid of everything. So Henselt of Cadwyn immediately comes at him with, do not compare us with the elves. You dishonor us with such a comparison. So right there, I get a sense of who Henselt is. Henselt is much more concerned with honor and is, racist, obviously, and does not have the same practicality or respect for history that King Vizimir has. Do not threaten us with Nilfgaard, Vizimir. Don't sow the seeds of propaganda. Nilfgaard, you say, is at the Yaruga? I say that Nilfgaard is sitting as quiet as a church mouse beyond the river, because we broke their spine at Sodden. We broke them militarily, and above all, we broke their morale. I don't know whether it's true that Emhyr Vem Emrys was, at the time, against aggression on such a scale, that the attack on Sintra was the work of some party hostile to him. I take it that if they had defeated us, he would be applauding, and distributing the privileges and endowments amongst them. But after Sodden, it suddenly turns out he was against it, and that everything which occurred was due to his marshal's insubordination, and heads fell, the scaffolds flowed with blood. These are certain facts, not rumors. 8 solemn executions, and many more modest ones. Several apparently natural yet mysterious deaths. A good many cases of people suddenly choosing to retire. I tell you, Emhyr fell into a rage and practically finished off his own commanders. So who will lead their army now? So this is interesting because, and Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, Emhyr Van Emrys is the one later on that is talking to Rince, if I'm not mistaken. So out of the gate, Henselt is seeming like he does not know what he's talking about. But then Henselt shares some pretty sincere. Melanie says, nope, chapter 1 is Sheldon Skaggs, so maybe no recurrences from that chapter yet. Okay. But he comes out of the gate feeling like he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then he seems to be dropping a lot of truths that are upheld later when we find out exactly how shady this is. Melanie says, what's the name you asked about with Rince? It is the Emhyr Van Emrys, whom Henselt of Cadwyn right now is talking a lot of smack about. He's basically acting like this guy totally stood to profit if we lost. We did not lose, and so all of a sudden he's acting like everything that happened was without his permission, that all of the people who organized this were basically traitors, and he killed and executed a lot of people to cover up his tracks because he was definitely plotting against us. And it seems like Henselt is more correct than he knows. It's hard to tell exactly how smart Emhyr is quite yet. Because we know he's working with Rince. We know that he's basically like, all right, we need to take this Witcher completely off the table, he says later. And that's smart. I mean, that's true. It's smart in that that would be the ideal thing to do. It's not smart in that taking the Witcher off the table is a much bigger proposition than he seems to realize. Nevertheless, I can't help but wonder how much of this Nilfgaard is sitting as quiet as a church mouse beyond the river because we broke their spine. I can't help but wonder if he is falling for a play that Emhyr has made to make it look like he was plotting against them. Like, how many plots within plots are there is basically what I'm asking. And he asks, so who will lead their army now? The sergeants? No, not the sergeants, said Demavend of Aedirn coldly. It will be young and gifted officers who have long waited for such an opportunity and have been trained by Emhyr for an equally long time. Those whom the older marshals stopped from taking command, prevented from being promoted. The young, gifted commanders about whom we already hear. Those who crushed the uprisings in Metina and Nazair, who rapidly broke up the rebels in Ebbing, commanders who appreciate the roles of outflanking maneuvers, of far-reaching cavalry raids, of swift infantry marches, and of landing operations from the sea. They use the tactics of crushing assaults in specific directions. They use the newest siege techniques instead of relying on uncertainties of magic. They must not be underestimated. They are itching to cross the Yaruga and prove they have learned from the mistakes of their old marshals. Sorry, Melanie is... Oh, okay. She's sharing a quote from Chapter 1. And this is the quote, guys. Nilfgaard is ruled by Emperor Emhyr van Emrys, a tyrant and autocrat who enforces obedience with whip, noose, and axe, thundered Baron Villibert. What are you proposing, Sir Dwarf? How are we supposed to close ranks? With similar tyranny? And which kingdom, in your opinion, should subordinate the others? Okay, so, Emhyr, I am going to guess I was right, and that was him talking to Rince. Emhyr, I'm curious about this dude. He seems pretty brutal. We'll talk about that in a bit. But right now, basically, this is a lot of back and forth because they're all discussing all these tactics. And this is a really, and forgive me, Melanie, here, this is really hard for me to talk about without just quoting directly what everybody is saying, because I need to be able to parse it, and do that out loud in order to get a handle on exactly what's happening here. Because he's talking about, and by he, I'm talking about Demavend of Aedirn. He is talking about how, they aren't going to be as reliant on magic as we have been in the past. They're not going to make those mistakes. The kinds of military maneuvers that they're going to employ are going to be much more effective without magic. So that if they add magic, basically what he's saying is if there's magic on top of the military aspect, we're going to be kind of fucked, because that's not something that, that's going to be like just putting whipped cream on something that's already great. And that's super dangerous. Henselt, meanwhile, again, if they've truly learned anything, they will not cross the Yaruga. The river estuary is still controlled by Ervil and his 3 strongholds. And he names these strongholds, guys, Nastrog, Rosrog, and Bodrog. I would die to know what those mean, because those just sound like troll names. It's just, I love it. They cannot be seized just like that. No new technology is going to help them there. Our flank is defended by Ithane of Sedaris' fleet, and thanks to it, we control the shore. And also, thanks to the pirates of Skellig. Jarl Cratch and Crate, if you remember, didn't sign a truce with Nilfgaard and regularly bites them, attacking and setting fire to the maritime settlements and forts and provinces. The Nilfgaardians have nicknamed him Sea Boar. They frighten children with him. Frightening Nilfgaardian children, smiled Vizimir wryly, will not ensure our safety. No, agreed Henselt, something else will. Without control of the estuary or the shore, and with the flank exposed, Emhyr var Emrys will be in no position to ensure provisions reach any detachments he might care to send across the Yaruga. What swift marches, what cavalry raids? Ridiculous. The army will come to a standstill within 3 days of crossing the river. Half will lay siege to the stronghold, and the rest will be slowly dispersed to plunder the region in search of fodder and food. And when their famed cavalry has eaten most of its own horses, we'll give them another sodden. Damn it, I'd like them to cross the river, but don't worry, they won't. Now, I'm curious about this, because he's saying they won't be able to send provisions, but we have seen that Emhyr has some, magicians working for him. So while the military positioning may not rely on magic, perhaps the supply lines rely on magic. And they're depending on him not being able to get his people what they need. But maybe he is able to get them what they need after all, which would be quite a blow. And that, that's something that doesn't seem to, and I don't know if it hasn't occurred to them, because magic on that scale is not quite doable in this world. It's hard for me. I'm not entirely sure what kind of magic is completely out of the realm of possibility here. Because being able to summon a portal for one person to jump through is one thing. Can there be a portal that whole wagons can go through? I don't know if that's possible or not. But none of them seem to be even considering it. So either I'm smarter than them, or that's very unlikely. And it just remains to be seen which one of those is true. Let us say, Meve of Lyria said suddenly, that they do not cross the Yaruga. Let us say that Nilfgaard will simply wait. Now let us consider who would that suit, them or us. Who can let themselves wait and do nothing, and who can't? Exactly, picked up Vizimir. Can't you see what is happening? Emhyr has time on his hands, gentlemen, but we don't. 3 years ago, Nilfgaard disturbed a small stone on the mountainside, and now they are calmly awaiting an avalanche. They can simply wait while new stones keep pouring down the slope, because to some, that first small stone looked like a boulder which would be impossible to move. And since it turned out that a mere touch sufficed to set it rolling, others appeared for whom an avalanche would prove convenient. From the Grey Mountains to Bremervoord, elven commandos rove the forest. This is no longer a small group of guerrilla fighters. This is war. Just wait and we'll see the free elves of Dol Blethana rise to fight. In Mahakam, the dwarves are rebelling. The dryads of Brokilon are growing bolder and bolder. This is war. War on a grand scale. Civil war, domestic. Our own. While Nilfgaard waits, whose side do you think time is on? The Scoia'tael commandos have 30 or 40-year-old elves fighting for them, and they live for 300 years. They have time. We don't. If the non-humans want war, they will get it, threw in Full Test of Temeria. I've always been an advocate of mutual agreement and coexistence, but if they prefer a test of strength, then we will see who is stronger. I am ready. I undertake to put an end to the squirrels in Temeria and Sodden within 6 months. Those lands have already run with elven blood once, shed by our ancestors. I consider the bloodletting a tragedy, but I do not see an alternative. The tragedy will be repeated. The elves have to be pacified. Your army will march against the elves if you give the orders, nodded Demavend. But will it march against humans? Against peasantry from which you muster your infantry? Against the guilds? Against free towns? Speaking of Scoia'tael, Vizimir described only one stone in the avalanche. Do not gape at me like that. Word is already going around the villages and towns that on the lands already taken by the Nilfgaard, peasants, farmers, and craftsmen are having an easier life, freer and richer, and the merchants' guilds have more privileges. We are inundated with goods from Nilfgaardian manufactories. In Bruges and Verden, their coin is ousting local currency. If we sit and do nothing, we will be finished, at odds with our neighbors, embroiled in conflict, tangled up in trying to quell rebellions and riots, and slowly subdued by the economic strength of the Nilfgaardians. We will be finished, suffocating in our own stuffy parochial corner, because understand this, Nilfgaard is cutting off our route to the south, and we have to develop, we have to be expansive, otherwise there won't be enough room here for our grandchildren. So, that's pretty interesting. I just think that, like, this is one of those things that I want to be more true than it appears to have been. He's talking about the encroaching, like, economy of Nilfgaard, and that, I feel like, is a more realistic threat than, because, you know, he had been saying how people are talking about, villages and towns taken by Nilfgaard have talk of peasants, farmers, and craftsmen having an easier life, freer and richer. So now, what I want to be true is for what is good for the small people to actually matter, the small folk, as they say. I want the needs and desires of the majority to actually be enough of a threat to those in power that they have to consider it in a real way. Unfortunately, history has taught us that it takes a really, really long time for the majority to be able to, like, get their feet under them enough to fight back against power, even when their livelihoods are on the lines, because of the fact that their livelihoods are on the lines. When you are in the position where you are fighting every day just to make ends meet, you are constantly distracted from the larger overarching issues because you are just trying to get through the fucking day. So this is presented as being like a real threat, and I want it to be a real threat because I want what's best for the people to wind up winning out. But I'm not entirely confident, you know, if it's going to matter what works for the smaller people, it's going to be in fantasy, honestly. I'm hoping that that's what happens here. Because in life, it doesn't seem to work out that way most of the time. All the worries of which we talk, said Henselt, are the work of Nilfgaard. It is Emhyr's emissaries who are inciting the non-humans, spreading propaganda, calling for riots. It is they who are throwing gold around and promising privileges to corporations and guilds, assuring barons and dukes they will receive high positions in the provinces they plan to create in place of our kingdoms. I don't know what it's like in your countries, but in Caedwyn, we've been inundated with clerics, preachers, fortune-tellers, and other shitty mystics. I highlighted that because I found that so funny. And other shitty mystics, all appearing out of the blue, all preaching the end of the world. And several other people, when he says this, are like, yes, us too. And one of them is saying, you know, they used to just kind of like read and study and be quiet. It's Foltest. He's like, but now it seems like something has roused them. And they're out here talking shit and people are actually listening to them. And he says, I put up with it because I'm less impetuous than my grandfather and less sensitive about my royal authority and dignity than he was. But my patience is starting to come to an end. And one of them quotes the prophecy. "The white flame," muttered Demavend, "white chill will come to be, and after it the white light. And then the world will be reborn through the white flame and the white queen." I've heard it too. It's a travesty of the prophecy of Ithlin ep Evian, the elven seeress. I gave orders to catch one cleric who was going on about it in the Vengerberg marketplace, and the torturer asked him politely and at length how much gold the prophet had received from Emhyr for doing it. But the preacher only prattled on about the white flame and the white queen, the same thing to the very end. So he just casually is like, yeah, so we had him tortured for quite a while. And I'm over here like, y'all are trying to act like you are so much better than Emhyr, but I'm not sure you are. Like, if everybody seems to be doing better under Nilfgaardian rule, if the small folk are actually, like, doing better, like, this dude, again, seems crazy. He's obviously, when we go to his POV chapter a little bit later, he's basically like, we need to make this man's execution as public, painful, and drawn out as possible, which is horrible, sure. But this dude is over here just torturing some, like, poor schmuck who's standing on the corner yelling about a prophecy. That doesn't seem like he is any better for anybody. And I'm just really curious, as much as Emhyr seems to be a bit of a monster, how much more monstrous he actually is than anybody else in this room. Because what's best for the people barely comes up, except in terms of how that's going to affect their strategy. All they are concerned about is making sure that they don't lose ground and lose their own crowns. Which seems on brand. People in power rarely think about anything other than keeping that power. But yeah, this like offhand remark about having him tortured, and then the next person isn't like, you had him tortured, what the fuck? Vizimir instead is like, don't make martyrs, that's what he's after. Catch all the Nilfgaardian agents you please, but do not lay hands on clerics. The consequences are too unpredictable. They are still held in regard and have an important influence on people. We have too much trouble with the squirrels to risk riots in our towns or war against our own peasants. Damn it, snorted Foltest. Let's not do this, let's not risk that. We mustn't this, we mustn't that. Have we gathered here to talk about all we can't do? Is that why you dragged us all to Hague, Demavend, to cry our hearts out and bemoan our weakness and helplessness? Let us find something to do. Something has to be done. I've been saying that from the start. Vizimir pulled himself up. I propose action. Everybody all of a sudden looks at Meave. And Vizimir says, I know you can find a solution to anything. You have a woman's intuition. You're a wise Stop flattering me. The Queen of Lyria clasped her hands in her lap and fixed her gaze on the darkened tapestries with their depictions of hunting scenes. What a weird moment. Is that just me? Because he's just like, well, we know that you're going to be able to figure it out. And it's moments like this where I feel like maybe I'm supposed to know more about her or their history than I do. I don't remember exactly where this book falls. I'm guessing this is the actual first book, Melanie. But there's a vibe throughout this conversation with them dropping like, oh, the elves of Barrowton and the dwarves of Rockenshire. That makes me feel like I should be more like, I should understand more of what they're referencing. And part of doing that sort of thing is just world building and setting it up that this is like, you know, an extant country with lots of different citizens in lots of different positions, and just basically making it feel like a real place. But for me, it happens so often and seems to be such a big part of the conversation that sometimes I feel lost. And I wish that he would slow down a little bit and have us like get our feet under us with different, like, for example, we start off this entire book with all of these different people discussing what's going on. And so far, the folks that we met there have barely come back around. So it would be, I think, better to establish what's going on in different countries, piece by piece, point by point. I don't know exactly how to do that gracefully, but there are other books that have managed to do that. And I feel like that would help so much in these sorts of conversations, because I start to run into, and I actually considered doing this book as an audiobook and changed my mind because I realized that I have to go back and check things too often. And there are so many instances where I think either I missed something and I go back and I realize I did not miss anything. He does not explain this. Or there are things that I get focused on because I want to know more and I think it's going to be important. And then it turns out to not be important at all. And I got totally sidetracked and it isn't anything. And it's really hard for me with this kind of conversation when things I have no context for get dropped so frequently in the conversation that I start to space out as I'm reading because I don't feel involved with the conversation because I have no idea half of what they're talking about. So I will either space out because I'm like, I don't know what this is, and I'm starting to get really frustrated. Or I space out thinking about what they just said and trying to figure that out. And I am still thinking about that as I read the next paragraph, and I realize I did not absorb any of that paragraph, and I have to go back and reread it. And it's just really, really tricky for me. I did the first Witcher book that I read was for the book club. I did that one with Rashawn, and I did that as an audiobook. And that was slightly easier because they were individual stories kind of contained within this thing in a frame narrative. So in that respect, because of it being broken up the way that it was better, but it was still really tough. There were a few times where Rashawn and I were talking about it, and I was like, I wish I just did this as a print book instead. And this is falling into that same pattern, but worse, because there isn't that frame narrative, and it isn't broken up into bite-sized pieces. And I feel like new pieces keep being added to the board when I still don't know what the old pieces are. Melanie says this is technically 3 as the short stories are first, but as you found with The Last Wish, which is the first book I read, guys, the author doesn't exactly explain things well all the time, pacing wise. Thus could be an issue because it's translated, but might not be and just be his way of writing. Yeah, I actually was saying that to Owen because I was discussing with him one of the sections, and I was like, I can't tell if this is like a translation thing or if he just wrote this in particular a little bit weird. But yeah, I would really I feel like this book would benefit from more than just like a map at the beginning. I want a map labeled with each of the rulers' names and any particular like clans that live there that are important. Like when they were talking about the dwarves or the sprites or whatever. Let me go back because now I'm like trying to remember who that was. If we sit and do nothing, I'm trying to find, oh, here it is. From the Grey Mountains to Bremervoord, elven commandos rove the forest. In Mahakam, the dwarves are rebelling. The dryads of Brokalan are growing bolder and bolder. Like this, I want a map that details who rules where and what kinds of creatures are like the majority in that area, and an outline of who is allied with who. Because it seems like Nilfgaard is completely on their own, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't have a good concept of how big Nilfgaard is compared to everybody else. Like, we've got multiple kings in this room for this conversation. Melanie says Natasha needs charts, diagrams, character bios, the works. Honestly, I do. Like, I feel like, I think you're right, Melanie, when you said the pacing is off. I think he needed to take his time setting this table and then get into what's going on with the common people talking about it and the setup with, Geralt and Ciri. But I think this should have come first and should have been really firmly outlined. And then we get into everything else, because it's really hard, similarly, to understand where Ciri and Triss are coming from with their trauma and their feelings of wanting to, like, get back at people who wronged them during this war. It's hard to understand where they're coming from when you don't understand what even happened to them. And to a degree, that sort of slow reveal can be really effective. That's something that's being done, for example, in the Crooked Kingdom, and was done in the previous book of the same series, Six of Crows, where you're given a taste, a hint of something that happened to a character, and then it's slowly revealed in more and more detail as the story goes on what happened. But that is specific to character development. Doing that is meant to get you to feel like you understand a person better. This is political, and so I need a lot better grounding if I'm to understand why these rulers feel threatened and who they are and what they have to lose. Because they're talking about, who's got kids and who's going to be like, who has a line of succession and who's like wanting to... I have no context for any of these people. And I really want to know how this author keeps it straight in his head. He has to have this information written down somewhere. Stick it in the book for me, guy. Let me know. This isn't like a Silmarillion situation where I didn't need this info, but I find it fascinating, but it is kind of dry and tedious. No, this is super important to the story. This is stuff we should know. So this conversation goes on for a while, and it took me a minute to really understand. And then there's this thing from the Queen of Lyria, Meve. She says this... I'm going to read this to you guys because I don't know what to make of this. The situation we find ourselves in reminds me of long winter evenings in Rivian Castle. Something always hung in the air. My husband would be contemplating how to get his hands on yet another maid of honor. The marshal would be working out how to start a war which would make him famous. The wizard would imagine he was king. The servants wouldn't feel like serving. The jester would be sad, gloomy, and excruciatingly dull. The dogs would howl with melancholy, and the cats sleep careless of any mice that might be scuttling around on the table. Everybody was waiting for something. Everyone was scowling at me. And I showed them. I showed them all what I was capable of in a way that made the very walls shake and the local grizzly bears wake in their winter lairs, and any silly thoughts disappeared from their heads in a trice. Suddenly, everyone knew who ruled. What is she talking about? Am I supposed to know what this is? Is this related to the dinner that Geralt went to where he stole Ciri away? Or not where he stole her, but kind of. It's where he made the deal. It's not the same woman, right? Because that was like magic that got out of control. And the way that she talks about this feels like that's... I'm just like... I don't know what this means. And she says, Nilfgaard is watching and waiting, observing us. Something is hanging in the air. Let us show them what we are capable of. And Henselt says, start a huge joint military operation. Treat the non-humans to a bloodbath. Yikes. So they're just going to go hard now. And then let's see. Set Kraesha Krayt and the Nilfgaardian at the Nilfgaardian shores. Support him with Ethane of Sedaris' fleet. Let them go ravaging from the Yaruga to Ebbing. A show of strength. And see, this is what I'm talking about, guys. Set Kraesha Krayt at the Nilfgaardian shores. Support him with Ethan of Sedaris' fleet. I don't know who these people are. So this doesn't mean anything to me. And I want to be in on this because this sounds interesting. This is like, got all the makings of a conversation that I'm going to get really invested in. But I have no context for any of this. So a lot of this conversation in the end is pretty much lost on me. And what we get in the end is, one of them, is it Foltest? I think Foltest is the one who suggests we need something that will be spectacular. That something is Sintra. Sintra will bind us and our rule together because Sintra is a symbol. Remember Sodden? If it were not for the massacre of that town and Calanthe's martyrdom, there would not have been such a victory then. The forces were equal. No one counted on our crushing them like that, but our armies threw themselves at their throats like wolves, like rabid dogs, to avenge the lioness of Sintra. And there are those whose fury was not quelled by the blood spilt on the field of Sodden. Remember Kraesha Krayt, the wild boar of the sea. So they want to get this back, I guess, is the point of Sintra. But it comes down to an argument about whether Ciri is actually still alive. Because Henselt says, don't be in such a hurry to tug the lion's whiskers because this lion is not dead yet. And he doesn't specifically say anything about her daughter, but later on, it's Meve, I think, who brings it up. Yeah, here it is. Apparently the queen's granddaughter survived the slaughter. Above all, Visigurd is waiting for the lion cub of Sintra. Allegedly, she was seen amongst the refugees, but the child mysteriously disappeared. The emigrants persist in their search for her because they need someone of royal blood to sit on their regained throne. Someone of Calanthe's blood. Nonsense, said Foltest coldly. More than 2 years have passed. If the child has not been found by now, she's dead. We can forget that myth. So you're going to send Sintrian guerrillas to their deaths? In the line of attack? Not telling them that Sintra can only be reborn as a vassal country under your protectorship? Because, yeah, Foltest is like, she's not alive. That's a myth. There's no lion cub. There's no royal blood left. Sintra will never be what it was. Obviously, we cannot say that to Visigurd's immigrants. So she's basically like, so you want to take Sintra back for yourself, not because they're going to be able to be an independent country the way that they were. And you don't even plan on telling them that. Admit it, Foltest, snapped Henselt. Is Meve right? Is that why you're inciting us to this affair? Come on, leave it. The ruler of Temeria furrowed his noble brow and bristled angrily. Don't make me out of some conqueror dreaming of an empire. What are you talking about? Sodden and Brugg? Eckhard of Sodden was my mother's half-brother. Are you surprised that following his death the Free States brought the crown to me? Blood, not water. And yes, the Venslag of Brugg paid me homage as vassal, but without coercion. He did it to protect his country, because on a fine day he can see Nilfgaardian lances flashing on the left bank of the Yaruga. And somebody says, well, all right, if we liberate Sintra, it should be something that is a joint protectorate. But Vizimir cuts in and says, no, it has to be a free country. It has to be free, independent, and strong. A country which will be an iron gateway, a bulwark to the north, and not a strip of burned ground over which the Nilfgaardian cavalry will be able to gather speed. So, I'm running out of time here, but I'm going to wrap this up. We have like a couple of different moments of like, you've been secretly sleeping with the Baroness for years, yada, yada, yada. Everybody's like sort of starting to bite at one another. And I'm trying to find the exact spot where, oh, right. Then they start to accuse everybody of like wanting to marry, like find Ciri so that they can marry her themselves. And finally, she cannot fall into the wrong hands alive. Infanticide, Meve grimaced. An ugly solution, my kings, unworthy and surely unnecessarily drastic. Let's find the girl, and when we have found her, give her to me. I'll keep her in some castle in the mountains for a couple of years, and marry her off to one of my knights. When you see her again, she will already have 2 children and a belly out to here. Leading to, if I count correctly, at least 3 future eventual pretenders and usurpers? Vizimir nodded. No, Meve. It is ugly, indeed. But the lion cub, if she has survived, must now die, for reasons of state. Gentlemen? And everybody goes silent. So, this is when we go to Emperor Emhyr var Emrys, a slender, black-haired man. And he is being told about this secret meeting and how this all went. They conferred in privacy. Can you guess what they're discussing, Kuhorn? I can, the marshal replied succinctly. He did not say a word more. He knew that the man with his back turned hated anyone to display any eloquence or comment on obvious facts in his presence. I enjoyed that. They did not invite Ethane of Sidaris, nor Erval of Verdun. They did not invite Esterred Thyssen or Niedemir, which means they're either very sure of themselves or very unsure. Guys, again, Erval of Verdun, Esterred Thyssen of Niedemir. I don't know any, like, I want to know what he's talking about. I want to know, and I don't know. So then he asks any word from Rince, and so we know that he's the one. And he dismisses this guy, finally. There's an enormous diamond on his ring that is mentioned more than once, and I can't help but wonder if that has some sort of like magical significance or something. So let's see. The rebellion in the province has been quelled. We've broken up the rebels. Only a few managed to escape to Verdun, and we caught their leader, Duke Windhelm of Atri. Good. Windhelm of Atri. Order him to be beheaded. No, not beheaded. Executed in some other way, spectacularly, lengthily, and cruelly. And publicly, it goes without saying. A terrifying example is necessary. Something that will frighten others. Only please spare me the details. You don't have to bother with a vivid description in your report. I take no pleasure from it. The marshal nodded, then swallowed hard. He, too, found no pleasure in it. No pleasure whatsoever. He intended to leave the preparations and performance of the execution to the specialists, and he did not have the least intention of asking those specialists for details. And above all, he did not intend to be there. You will be present at the execution. Officially. Oh, man, that sucks. I feel so bad for this marshal. I really do. Like, I can't imagine anything worse than being forced to watch somebody being tortured and killed when you're when you're somebody like a normal person who finds that sort of thing very upsetting and hasn't learned to shut off that part of their brain or their heart. So then he says, Cohorn, I'm not going to wait for Rince's report. Set the magicians to work and have them prepare a telecommunication link with their point of contact in Redania. Let them pass on my verbal orders, which must immediately be sent to Rince. The order is to run as follows. Rince is to stop pussyfooting around and to stop playing with the Witcher, else it could end up badly. No one toys with the Witcher. I know him. He's too clever to lead Rince to the trail. Rince is to organize the assassination immediately, to take the Witcher out of the game at once. He's to kill him and then disappear, bide his time, and await my orders. If he comes across the Enchantress's trail before that, he is to leave her alone. Not a hair on Yennefer's head is to be harmed. The communique is to be coded and firmly secured against any magical deciphering. Forewarn the wizards about this. If they bungle it, if any undesirables learn of my order, I will hold them responsible. So then he mentions that the Count is here. Again, I don't know who that is. I don't know what that means. And he comes in, and he is wearing this like black helmet with feathers, and I feel like this is the guy that Ciri sees in her dreams. I think this is the dude who like tried to take her, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not positive. In order for everything to be perfectly clear, you should understand that the mistake you made in this town 2 years ago has not been forgiven. You are getting one more chance. My decision as to your ultimate fate depends on which way you carry it out. The young knight's face did not twitch, nor did a single feather on the wings adorning the helmet at his hip. I never deceive anyone. I never give anyone false illusions, continued the man. So let it be known that, naturally, the prospect of saving your neck from the executioner's axe exists only if you do not make a mistake this time. Your chances of a full pardon are small, and your chances of my forgiving and forgetting are non-existent. The young knight did not flinch this time either, but Cohorn detected the flash in his eyes. He doesn't believe him, he thought. He doesn't believe him and is deluding himself. He is making a great mistake. So yeah, then I'm going to read this last bit. They both waited in silence, patiently, the way one should wait for orders, the substance and presentation of which were being pondered by the Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emhyr van Emrys, Dithwin Aden in Carp ep Morvud, the white flame dancing on the grave mounds of enemies. Which I guess is a title? I would like some explanation here. This is what I'm talking about. We get a brief stint with Ciri, and she is having all kinds of dreams about, like, basically, she's seeing what's going on with Geralt. She's able to, like, watch from above as if she were a bird, which makes me wonder if there's something going on with her connecting with Philippa, who can actually turn into an owl, but I don't know if that's a real connection or if it's just like, circumstantial. And strange dream, thought Ciri. Shame I woke up. I'd have liked to see what was going to happen. Next chamber, Mother Nenneke was speaking quickly, clearly worked up, agitated, and angry. You betrayed my trust. I shouldn't have allowed it. I might have guessed that your dislike of her would lead to disaster. I shouldn't have allowed you. After all, I know you. You're ruthless, you're cruel, and to make matters worse, it turns out you're also irresponsible and careless. You're torturing that child mercilessly, forcing her to try things which she can't possibly do. You've no heart. You really have no heart, Yennefer. So Yennefer's here. Surprise! And she apparently is, like, quote, teaching Ciri. She wanted to hear Yennefer say what she usually said, that using magic is no joke, that it isn't an occupation for young ladies made of porcelain, for dolls blown from thin glass. But Yennefer answered quietly, so quietly that the girl could neither understand nor make out the individual words. So she falls back asleep and dreams, I'm pretty sure it's a dream, that Yennefer is holding her hand, and she is walking through this long hallway. And let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. Ciri saw another door in front of her. Yennefer did not slow her stride, but Ciri knew suddenly that this door would not open of its own accord, and she suddenly had an overwhelming certainty that this door must not be opened, that she must not go through it. She stopped short, trying to pull away, but Yennefer's hand was strong and unyielding and dragged her forward. And Ciri finally understood that she had been betrayed, deceived, sold out, that ever since the first meeting, from the very beginning, from the first day, she had been no more than a marionette, a puppet on a string. She tugged harder, tore herself away from the grip. The darkness undulated like smoke, and the whispering in the dark all of a sudden died away. The magician took a step forward, stopped, turned round, and looked at her. If you're afraid, turn back. That door mustn't be opened. You know that. If you're afraid, turn back. You still have time to turn back. It's not too late. For me, it is. Despite the omnipresent darkness, she saw the door which they had passed through, and a long distant vista. And there from a distance, from the darkness, she heard the clatter of hooves, the grating of black armor, and the flutter of the wings of a bird of prey, and his voice boring into her skull. You have made a mistake. You mistook the stars reflected in the surface of the lake at night for the heavens. So she has this dream, and later on, one of the magicians in this meeting also says that same thing. And I'm not sure if we're supposed to believe that this knight is that magician. I don't think so, because he was referred to as the Count when he comes and sees Emhyr. But yeah, this whole thing is just a really, like, I'm wondering a lot about this. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. We have the meeting of Rince trying to get to Blanc, who is part of, like, it seems a group of, like, mercenaries. He's hiring them to help kill the Witcher. And to Blanc is smart enough to tell that this guy is hiding something. And it's like, no. You know what? It's going to cost you twice as much, because obviously there's something about this that you're not telling us. And Rince agrees right away. And to Blanc is like, fuck, you agreed too fast. Obviously, I'm still not charging enough. So we have this moment of trying to get past this gate into this area with Geralt and his buddies. And the medical student, what's her name? She lies in order to get this guy to open the gate. When I was here 3 days ago, they're questioning the dude who opened the gate. In this high-backed chair at this table sat a gentleman in a cloak lined with muskrat. He was drinking wine, and you never entertain anybody, only the best of friends. He flirted with me, brazenly urged me to go dancing at the Three Little Bells. I had to slap his hand because he was starting to fondle me, remember? And you said, leave her alone, Master Rince. Don't frighten her. I needs must be on good terms with the little academic and do business. And you both chuckled, you and your Master Rince with a burned face. So don't start playing dumb now, because you're not dealing with someone dumber than yourself. Talk while you're still being asked politely. And he obviously is very mad about this. Am I to know who he is? All sorts come out here. And she's just like, oh, if you don't fucking tell me. And the Witcher gets right up close to his face. And he won't talk still. So finally, let's see. Oh, here it is, right. Why risk him twisting the truth and lying? Allow me to take care of him my way. He'll talk so fast, he'll bite his own tongue. Hold him down. So Philippa comes here, and she is about to do something to, like, force him to tell them the truth, and it sounds like it's going to hurt, and I kind of feel bad for the guy. So we have this meeting of the wizards, and I am running out of time. There's so much in this chapter. This felt long, and it's not like it was particularly, like, it's like 60 pages. It was a little over 50, but it's just so dense with information, and so much of this information I, like, needed to talk about and be clarified that it took longer to talk about than usual. So apologies, Melanie. I will try and touch on some more of this in the next episode and get back to parts of this. But this meeting with all of these magicians, it takes forever for them to get to the point. which maybe is part of the point. And there's like talk about how the main wizard here, his name is Vilgefortz. There is a woman, Lydia, she's like totally in love with him. And everybody knows it and he knows it, but it's totally not going to happen. So everybody just kind of has to sit on it and like deal with the fact that it's never going to happen and it's going to be kind of uncomfortable forever. But he says that we need to basically ignore the plans that they're making. We need to let this play out as much as we can. The king's plans are already at the stage of practical realization. The blood of young elves is flowing. It's reaching the point of persecution and pogroms against non-humans. You want us to do nothing? You're right. War with Nilfgaard is one thing, but we must not look on idly at the massacre of non-humans and do nothing. We should have a convention, make them see reason. I second this proposition. And let's see, Metal, Stone, Crystal, are you looking for Yennefer? Why? What does she have to do with Ithlin's prophecy? Because apparently he's aware that she's got Ciri with her. I don't know how, though. Melanie, I'm sorry. There's still so much left to talk about in this chapter, and I'm totally out of time, and I have another one coming up. So she says, no need to apologize, but I do need to apologize because I wasn't able to finish this. But guys, I'm going to try and talk because like this conversation I feel like is more important than even the one that the royals were having. And I understand in some ways even less of it. So I need to come back to this. I'm so frustrated, guys. I want to talk about all of this and I just don't have the time. All right. Well, forgive me, everybody, but I'm going to come back to this. I promise. I'm not done talking about this chapter. And I will do my best to kind of like get my thoughts in better order before I start the next one. And that way I'll be able to touch on everything a little bit more cohesively. I'm sorry about it, but I'm very curious. But like, we're almost at the end of this book and it does not feel that way. So I don't know what to expect with this last chapter. So with that, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you for your understanding. And I'll see you soon, hopefully, with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.